The crystal champagne flute shattered against marble flooring, silencing the elegant ballroom. Victoria Harrington's perfectly painted lips parted in shock as she stared at the man who had just entered her mansion. He wasn't supposed to look like that. He wasn't supposed to command the room's attention. And he certainly wasn't supposed to make her feel this strange flutter in her chest, a sensation she hadn't experienced in years. This cruel joke was backfiring spectacularly, and everyone was watching. If you're enjoying this story of unexpected transformation and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more emotional stories that will touch your heart. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful narratives to life. Victoria Harrington had everything: money, power, beauty, and the respect of Boston's elite social circle. What she lacked was kindness, a fact well known to her employees, especially her driver, James Sullivan. A single father struggling to provide for his daughter while hiding a past that would shock everyone in the room. Tonight would change everything for both of them, in ways neither could imagine. The invitation had been extended as a cruel joke, a way to humiliate the man who drove her Bentley. But James Sullivan had secrets of his own, secrets that would turn Victoria's perfectly controlled world upside down and force her to confront the emptiness behind her wealth. By evening's end, it wouldn't be James who felt humiliated, but the woman who had orchestrated his invitation with such malicious intent. Victoria Harrington surveyed her grand ballroom with satisfaction. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the cream-colored walls adorned with original artwork worth millions. Waiters in crisp black uniforms circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres prepared by a chef she'd flown in from Paris specifically for this evening. The annual Harrington Foundation Charity Gala was her crowning achievement, a night when Boston's wealthiest and most influential gathered under her roof, ostensibly to raise money for underprivileged children but primarily to see and be seen. "Everything is perfect, Claudia," Victoria said to her personal assistant, a nervous young woman who had been working for her for just 3 months. The previous assistant had lasted 6. "The flowers are acceptable, the champagne is properly chilled, and the guest list is impeccable." "Thank you, Ms. Harrington," Claudia replied, clutching her tablet to her chest. "The governor just arrived, and the mayor is expected within the hour." Victoria nodded, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her custom Valentino gown. At 42, she maintained her beauty with rigorous discipline, daily workouts with Boston's most exclusive trainer, regular visits to dermatologists and plastic surgeons, and a diet so strict it would make a ballerina wince. Her blonde hair was styled in an elegant updo, showcasing the diamond earrings that had once belonged to her grandmother. "And what about our special guest?" Victoria asked, her red lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Claudia shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Sullivan confirmed he would attend. His daughter is staying with a neighbor." "Excellent." Victoria took a sip of champagne. "I do hope he found something appropriate to wear. It would be so embarrassing for him otherwise." The idea had come to her 3 weeks ago, when she'd overheard James Sullivan, her driver of 2 years, talking to his daughter on the phone. The girl, 10 or 11, Victoria couldn't remember, had been upset about not being able to attend some school dance because she didn't have a dress. James had promised to figure something out, his voice gentle but strained with the unmistakable tension of financial worry. Victoria had been struck by a deliciously wicked thought. Wouldn't it be amusing to invite her driver to the gala? To watch him fumble through high society conversation, to see him struggle with which fork to use? She could introduce him to her friends as my charity case for the evening. After all, wasn't that what the gala was supposedly about? Helping the less fortunate? The invitation had been extended casually, as if it were an afterthought. "Oh, James, I'm having a little gathering next Friday. You should come. Bring a date if you'd like." She'd watched his face carefully, noting the surprise, the suspicion, and then the reluctant gratitude. "That's very kind, Ms. Harrington, but I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense," she'd insisted. "Consider it a thank you for your service. Besides, it's for charity. Children's education, actually. I thought you might appreciate that, given your daughter. That had been the hook that caught him. Victoria knew he wouldn't be able to resist an event that might somehow benefit his precious child. He'd accepted with a nod, and Victoria had spent the following weeks anticipating the entertainment his presence would provide. Now, as guests in designer gowns and bespoke suits filled her home, Victoria found herself looking toward the entrance more frequently than usual. Where was he? Had he lost his nerve? That would be disappointing. Ms. Harrington, Senator Collins would like a word, Claudia interrupted her thoughts. Victoria plastered on her society smile and turned to greet the senator, a portly man whose campaign she had generously supported last year. Senator, how lovely to see you. I trust you're enjoying yourself? The next hour passed in a blur of practiced small talk and air kisses. Victoria moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who had been born into this world of privilege and power. The Harrington name opened doors throughout New England, and Victoria had spent her life ensuring that legacy continued. After her parents' death in a yacht accident 10 years ago, she had taken control of Harrington Industries with an iron fist, surprising those who had dismissed her as merely decorative. She was in the middle of a conversation with the dean of a prestigious university when the room's energy shifted. Victoria sensed it before she saw the cause, a subtle change in the ambient noise, heads turning toward the entrance, whispers rippling through the crowd. Victoria turned, champagne flute in hand, expecting to see a celebrity or politician making a grand entrance. Instead, she saw James Sullivan. The crystal flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. James stood in the doorway, but he looked nothing like the man who drove her car each day. Gone was the simple black uniform she was accustomed to seeing him in. Instead, he wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that accentuated his broad shoulders and tall frame. His dark hair, usually hidden under a driver's cap, was styled in a way that highlighted his strong jawline and striking green eyes. He carried himself with unexpected confidence, scanning the room with the ease of someone who belonged there. But it wasn't just his appearance that caused Victoria's shock. It was the reaction of her guests. Margaret Whitmore, the 70-year-old matriarch of one of Boston's oldest families, was approaching him with open arms. The French ambassador was nodding in recognition. And Richard Pemberton, CEO of New England's largest banking group, was actually laughing and clapping James on the shoulder like an old friend. "My goodness," the university dean murmured beside Victoria. "Is that James Sullivan? I had no idea he would be here tonight." Victoria struggled to compose herself. "You know my driver?" The dean looked at her with surprise. "Your driver? James Sullivan is your driver?" He chuckled. "Well, I suppose even a man of his background needs to make ends meet sometimes." Fascinating. Before Victoria could demand an explanation, the dean had moved away, heading toward James with evident enthusiasm. Victoria stood frozen, watching as her carefully orchestrated evening took an unexpected turn. James was now surrounded by a small crowd, accepting greetings with grace and responding to questions with articulate ease. "Ms. Harrington?" Claudia appeared at her elbow, a fresh glass of champagne in hand. "Is everything all right? You look pale." Victoria accepted the champagne and took a large sip. "Who is he, Claudia? Who is James Sullivan really?" Claudia blinked in confusion. "I'm not sure I understand." "He's your driver, isn't he?" "Apparently, he's much more than that." Victoria's eyes narrowed as she watched James charm Mrs. Whitmore, who was now introducing him to her granddaughter. The young woman was gazing up at him with undisguised interest. "Find out everything you can. Now." As Claudia hurried away, Victoria took another sip of champagne and forced herself to smile. Whatever game James Sullivan was playing, she would not be made a fool in her own home. She smoothed her dress, checked her reflection in a nearby mirror, and moved purposefully toward her driver. "James," she called, her voice carrying just the right note of pleased surprise. "How wonderful that you could join us. James turned, and for a brief moment, Victoria saw something flash in his eyes, knowledge, perhaps, or amusement. Then it was gone, replaced by the respectful expression she was accustomed to. "Miss Harrington," he said, inclining his head slightly. "Thank you for the invitation. You have a beautiful home. You've never been inside before, have you?" Victoria said, aware of the eyes on them. "Always waiting in the car." There was a slight pause, during which Victoria felt a flicker of satisfaction. She had reminded everyone of his position, his place. But then Mrs. Whitmore laughed. "Victoria, darling, don't tell me you didn't know. James here was practically raised in houses like this. His father was Charles Sullivan." Victoria maintained her smile with effort. The name meant nothing to her. "Of Sullivan Shipping," Mrs. Whitmore continued, apparently sensing Victoria's confusion. "One of the largest private fleets on the East Coast before the merger with Global Marine. Charles and I served on several boards together. Brilliant man, taken too soon." James cleared his throat. "That was a long time ago, Mrs. Whitmore." "Nonsense," the older woman patted his arm. "Legacy doesn't disappear. And speaking of legacy, I hear your daughter is quite the talented young lady. Following in your footsteps with the violin, I understand." Victoria felt as though she had stepped into an alternate reality. James Sullivan, her quiet, unassuming driver, had a background in shipping wealth. Played the violin. None of this aligned with the man who opened her car door and navigated Boston traffic with silent efficiency. "Lily is much more talented than I ever was," James said, a genuine smile softening his features. "She's the real musician in the family." "You're too modest," Richard Pemberton joined the conversation. "I still remember that Bach concerto you performed at the conservatory benefit. Must have been, 15 years ago? Before everything happened with the company." James nodded, a shadow crossing his face. 16 years. Different lifetime. Victoria's mind raced. 16 years ago, she had been fresh out of business school, taking her first steps in the family company under her father's guidance. She had been focused on proving herself, on showing that she was more than just the Harrington heiress. She wouldn't have paid attention to shipping company news or classical music performances. "James," she said, injecting warmth into her voice, "you've been holding out on me. All this time, I had no idea you had such a colorful background." His green eyes met hers, and Victoria was disconcerted by what she saw there, not embarrassment or discomfort, but a calm assessment, as if he were seeing through her practiced charm to something underneath. "We all have our stories, Miss Harrington," he replied. "Some of us just don't feel the need to tell them to everyone we meet." Before Victoria could respond to what felt distinctly like a rebuke, Claudia appeared at her side, slightly breathless. "Miss Harrington, there's a small issue with the caterers that requires your attention," she said, though her eyes darted nervously to James. "Excuse me," Victoria said to the group, maintaining her composure. "Duty calls. James, please enjoy yourself. Consider yourself off duty tonight." As she walked away, she heard Mrs. Whitmore say, "Such a lovely girl, Victoria. Though I've always thought she tries a bit too hard. Not quite old money, you know, despite the name. Her grandfather was in steel manufacturing, started from nothing. Admirable, of course, but—" Victoria quickened her pace, her cheeks burning. Once she and Claudia were in the relative privacy of the kitchen corridor, she turned to her assistant. "Tell me everything." Claudia glanced down at her tablet. James Sullivan, 45 years old. Son of Charles and Eleanor Sullivan. His father founded Sullivan Shipping in the 1970s, built it into a major East Coast operation. James was the only child and heir apparent. He attended Phillips Exeter Academy, then Harvard for undergraduate and Wharton for his MBA. Victoria felt each word like a physical blow. Harvard? Wharton? Her driver had attended the same prestigious institutions she had. He was also an accomplished violinist, Claudia continued. Considered pursuing music professionally before joining the family business. Married Sophia Reeves, a concert pianist, in 2005. They had one daughter, Lily, born in 2013. What happened? Victoria demanded. How does someone go from shipping air to driving my car? Claudia looked uncomfortable. There was a financial collapse in 2015. Sullivan Shipping had expanded aggressively, taking on significant debt. When the shipping industry faced a downturn, they couldn't meet their obligations. There were also allegations of mismanagement, though nothing was ever proven. The company was forced to sell to Global Marine at a fraction of its value. And his wife? The pianist? She died in 2018. Cancer. Victoria closed her eyes briefly. A fallen heir. A widower. A single father. The perfect sob story, except James had never once mentioned any of it. He had never complained, never hinted at his past, never used it to curry favor or sympathy. There's more, Claudia said hesitantly. After the company collapsed, he sold most of his assets to pay off creditors, including his family home. He kept enough to provide for his daughter's education and basic needs, but he's been working various jobs since then. He's been your driver for 2 years, but he also teaches violin at a community music school 3 evenings a week. Victoria thought of the many times she had kept him waiting while she finished shopping or extended lunches with friends. Had he been rushing to get to his teaching job? Had she made him late to his daughter's events? She had never asked, never considered his life beyond his role in hers. Why didn't I know any of this? She demanded. Claudia looked down. The background check when he was hired focused on criminal history, driving record, and basic employment verification. Personal history wasn't prioritized. Because Victoria hadn't cared. She hadn't been interested in who drove her car, only that they were punctual, discreet, and competent. James had been all those things, fading into the background of her life like the other staff she employed but rarely noticed. Ms. Harrington? Claudia ventured. The caterers don't actually need you. I just thought you might want this information privately. Victoria nodded, gathering herself. Yes, thank you, Claudia. That was thoughtful. She smoothed her dress again, a nervous habit. I should return to my guests. When she re-entered the ballroom, her eyes immediately sought out James. He was now speaking with the governor, their conversation appearing animated and genuine. The governor's wife was smiling up at James with obvious admiration. Victoria felt a strange twist in her stomach that she refused to acknowledge as jealousy. Throughout the evening, she watched as James moved through her gala with unexpected ease. He knew which fork to use. He could discuss politics, art, and business with equal facility. He even played the grand piano in the corner of the ballroom at Mrs. Whitmore's insistence, his fingers moving across the keys with skill that silenced the room and earned him enthusiastic applause. And through it all, he never once approached Victoria, never sought her approval or acknowledgement. It was as if their usual roles had been reversed. She was now the one watching from the periphery while he commanded attention. By midnight, as guests began to depart, Victoria found herself standing alone near the terrace doors, a fresh glass of champagne in hand. The evening had been a success by all objective measures. The donation total had exceeded last year's by 30%, the governor had publicly praised the Harrington Foundation's work, and society columnists had been taking notes throughout the night. Yet Victoria felt unsettled, off balance in a way she couldn't remember feeling since her parents' funeral. She had invited James Sullivan to humiliate him, to use him as entertainment for herself and her friends. Instead, he had revealed himself to be more complex, more accomplished, and more respected than she had imagined possible. Ms. Harrington. She turned to find James standing beside her, his expression unreadable. I wanted to thank you for the invitation before I left, he said formally. It was an enlightening evening. Victoria studied him, seeing him properly perhaps for the first time. "You never told me who you were. You never asked." His response was simple, without accusation. "Would you have told me if I had?" James considered this. "Perhaps. Though I've found that people who need to ask about others' backgrounds rarely care about the answer." The observation stung with its accuracy. "And yet you work as my driver." "It's honest work," James replied without a hint of shame. "And it allows me to be there for Lily when she needs me. The hours are predictable, unlike corporate positions. After everything that happened, stability became my priority." Victoria took a sip of champagne, buying herself time. "I invited you here as a joke," she admitted suddenly, the words escaping before she could reconsider. "I wanted to watch you fumble through high society, to see you uncomfortable. I thought it would be amusing." She expected anger, perhaps resignation. Instead, James smiled slightly. "I know." "You knew?" Victoria was taken aback. "Ms. Harrington, I've been driving you for 2 years. I've overheard enough phone calls and conversations to understand how you view people like me, or who you thought I was." His voice remained calm, matter-of-fact. "I accepted your invitation because I was curious to see what would happen when your worlds collided." Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks. So this was all some sort of reverse humiliation? "You wanted to embarrass me?" "No," James shook his head. "I wanted you to see that people are more than their jobs, more than their current circumstances. Everyone has a story, Ms. Harrington. Even the man who opens your car door." They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the remaining guests and staff clearing dishes creating a distant backdrop. "Your daughter," Victoria said finally. "The one who needed a dress for the dance. Did she get to go?" Something softened in James's expression. "Yes. I found a second-hand dress that we altered together. She had a wonderful time." Victoria nodded, an uncomfortable feeling settling in her chest. "Good. That's good." James checked his watch. "I should go. Mrs. Chen can only watch Lily until 1. "Of course." Victoria hesitated, then added, "Will I see you Monday morning?" "For work?" James studied her face. "Do you still want me as your driver, now that you know?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Victoria found herself genuinely considering it. Would it be more uncomfortable to continue employing him, knowing what she now knew? Or to find someone new, someone who wouldn't remind her of this night and her own pettiness? "Yes," she said finally. "If you're willing." James nodded once. "Then I'll see you Monday morning. Good night, Ms. Harrington." As he walked away, Victoria remained by the terrace doors, watching his tall figure move through the thinning crowd. Several guests stopped him to say goodbye, to exchange contact information, to make plans. He had connected more genuinely with her social circle in one evening than she had in years of calculated networking. The weekend passed slowly for Victoria. She found herself distracted during her usual routines, her Saturday morning Pilates class, her afternoon at the spa, her Sunday brunch with acquaintances she called friends but who never seemed to share anything meaningful with her. Her thoughts kept returning to James Sullivan and the life he had lived, the losses he had endured, the dignity with which he had carried himself. By Monday morning, Victoria was uncharacteristically nervous as she waited for her car. When the familiar black Bentley pulled up precisely at 8, she took a deep breath before stepping outside. James stood by the rear door, dressed in his usual uniform, his expression professionally neutral. "Good morning, Ms. Harrington." "Good morning, James." She hesitated before getting into the car. "I hope you had a pleasant weekend." If he was surprised by the small talk, he didn't show it. "Yes, thank you. Lily had a recital yesterday. She played Vivaldi." Victoria nodded, sliding into the back seat. As James closed the door and walked around to the driver's side, she found herself wondering what his daughter looked like, whether she resembled him, whether she had inherited his musical talent along with his resilience. The drive to her office was quiet, as usual. Victoria checked emails on her phone, but her focus kept drifting. Finally, as they approached the Harrington Industries headquarters, she put her phone down. "James," she said, meeting his eyes in the rearview mirror. "I owe you an apology." His eyes flickered with surprise before returning to the road. "That's not necessary, Ms. Harrington." "It is." Victoria rarely apologized, but she found the words coming more easily than expected. "What I did was cruel and childish. I'm sorry." James pulled the car to a smooth stop in front of her building. For a moment, he remained silent, hands still on the wheel. Then he turned slightly in his seat. "Apology accepted," he said simply. Victoria nodded, gathering her purse and briefcase. As James opened her door, she stepped out and then paused. "Your daughter's school, it's Westridge Academy, isn't it?" James looked surprised. "Yes. How did you know?" "I did some research over the weekend." Victoria straightened her jacket. "The Harrington Foundation is establishing a new arts scholarship there. Full tuition through high school, plus private music lessons and summer programs. The selection committee will be reviewing applications next month." Understanding dawned in James's eyes. "Ms. Harrington." "It's not charity," she interrupted, anticipating his objection. "It's an investment in talent. From what I understand, your daughter has exceptional potential. The foundation would be fortunate to support her development." James studied her face, perhaps looking for signs of manipulation or ulterior motives. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him, because he nodded slowly. "Thank you. I'll make sure Lily submits an application." "Good." Victoria hesitated, then added, "And perhaps, you might consider teaching a master class for the scholarship recipients. If your schedule permits." A genuine smile transformed his face, making him look younger, more like the man who had played piano at her gala. "I'd like that." Victoria returned his smile, feeling something shift between them, not friendship exactly, but a mutual recognition, a step toward seeing each other as complete human beings rather than merely employer and employee. "I'll be finished at 5 today," she said. "And I don't need to rush. If you have teaching commitments this evening." "Thank you, Ms. Harrington. I appreciate that." As Victoria walked into her building, she felt lighter somehow, as if she had set down a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying. The day ahead was filled with meetings and decisions, profits and losses, the business of maintaining the Harrington legacy. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Victoria found herself thinking beyond the bottom line, beyond appearances and social standing. She thought of James Sullivan, who had lost everything and started again. Who taught music to children while driving the wealthy around Boston. Who had raised a talented daughter on his own after losing his wife. Who had accepted Victoria's apology with grace, despite having every reason to reject it. There were lessons there, if she was willing to learn them. Over the following months, a gradual transformation took place in Victoria Harrington's life. It began with small changes, learning her housekeeper's children's names, asking her assistant about her weekend plans, allowing herself to be 5 minutes late to a meeting because her chef wanted to tell her about his son's college acceptance. She found herself paying attention to the people who had always existed on the periphery of her world. The barista who remembered her complicated coffee order. The security guard who always greeted her with a smile. The janitor who worked late nights at her office building. They had names, lives, stories, and Victoria began to learn them. James remained her driver, their relationship evolving into something that resembled mutual respect. Victoria learned about Lily's progress at school, her violin competitions, her dreams of Juilliard. She heard about James's community music program, which offered free lessons to children who couldn't afford them. And sometimes, when traffic was heavy or when Victoria wasn't buried in work calls, James would share stories of his former life, sailing adventures with his father, concert halls where his wife had performed, the early days of building Sullivan Shipping. 6 months after the gala, Victoria found herself sitting in a school auditorium, watching Lily Sullivan perform a violin concerto that brought tears to her eyes. The girl was extraordinary, slender and serious like her father, with the same intense focus when she played. Victoria had come alone, slipping into the back row without announcement, wanting to witness this talent without disrupting it with her presence. After the performance, she watched James embrace his daughter, his pride evident even from a distance. Several other parents approached them, offering congratulations. A music teacher hovered nearby, clearly eager to discuss Lily's performance. They were a community, Victoria realized, not defined by wealth or status, but by shared passion and genuine connection. As she slipped out of the auditorium, Victoria felt a strange mixture of emotions. Envy, yes, for the authentic relationships she saw around her. But also determination. If James Sullivan could rebuild his life from the ashes of financial ruin and personal tragedy, surely Victoria Harrington could learn to build something more meaningful than the hollow success she had achieved. The following week, Victoria made an unexpected announcement at the Harrington Industries board meeting. The company would be establishing a significant new philanthropic initiative, not just for the tax benefits or public relations value, but with a genuine commitment to impact. The Harrington Community Arts Program would provide funding for music, visual arts, and performing arts education in underserved Boston neighborhoods. And to lead this initiative, she had hired a new director, James Sullivan. When she offered him the position, James had been skeptical. "Why me?" "Because you understand both worlds," Victoria had explained. "You know what it means to have everything and lose it. You know what truly matters. And you've never lost your commitment to sharing the arts with those who need them most." He had accepted with one condition, that he could continue teaching his community violin classes 2 evenings a week. Victoria had agreed immediately. 1 year after the gala where Victoria had intended to humiliate her driver, she hosted another event. This time, it was the launch of the Harrington Community Arts Program, held not in her mansion but in a renovated warehouse in one of Boston's working-class neighborhoods. Children from the pilot program performed alongside professional musicians. Parents who had never set foot in Symphony Hall watched their children play instruments they had never imagined owning. And in the center of it all was James Sullivan, moving between groups with easy confidence, introducing students to donors, explaining the program's vision to community leaders. He caught Victoria's eye across the room and nodded, a simple acknowledgement of how far they had both come. Later, as the event wound down, James found Victoria standing near the makeshift stage, watching as Lily helped younger students pack up their instruments. "She's good with them," Victoria observed. "She has your patience." James smiled. "And her mother's kindness." He followed Victoria's gaze. "Thank you for all of this. Not just the program, but the scholarship for Lily, the opportunity for me. It's made a difference." "You made the difference," Victoria corrected him. "I just provided resources. You're the one who built something meaningful with them." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the activity around them. "You know," James said finally, "a year ago, I never would have believed we'd be standing here like this." Victoria laughed softly. "A year ago, I invited you to a party to mock you. And I showed up anyway. Why did you?" Victoria had wondered this for months. "You knew my intentions weren't kind. You could have declined." James considered this. "I think I saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself. Potential. The possibility of growth." He shrugged. "Or maybe I just wanted to see the look on your face when I played Chopin on your grand piano." Victoria smiled, remembering her shock that night. "It was a good look?" "Priceless," James confirmed, his green eyes crinkling with amusement. A young girl approached them, violin case in hand. Dad, Ms. Chen invited us for dinner to celebrate. Can we go? Of course, James said, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Lily, you remember Ms. Harrington? The girl nodded politely. Thank you for coming to my school concert last month. Dad said you snuck in the back, but I saw you. Victoria felt a flush of embarrassment. You played beautifully. I didn't want to intrude. You should come to the next one, Lily said with the directness of youth. I'm playing Bach. It's harder, but Dad's helping me practice. I'd like that, Victoria replied, surprised to realize she meant it. James squeezed his daughter's shoulder. Why don't you go help the Ramirez twins with their cases? I'll be right there. As Lily walked away, James turned back to Victoria. Would you like to join us for dinner? Nothing fancy, just Chinese food with Lily's violin teacher and her family. They've become good friends. Victoria hesitated. Her usual Friday night would involve either a business dinner with clients or a quiet evening alone in her large, empty house. The thought of casual Chinese food with people who actually enjoyed each other's company was both appealing and terrifying. I wouldn't want to impose, she said, echoing the words James had used when she first invited him to her gala. James smiled, recognizing the callback. Consider it a thank you for your support. Besides, it's for the arts. I thought you might appreciate that. Victoria found herself smiling back. In that case, I accept. As they walked toward the exit, Victoria realized that the cruel joke she had planned a year ago had transformed into something she could never have anticipated, not just a successful community program or a professional relationship with James Sullivan, but a fundamental shift in how she viewed the world and her place in it. The rich lady who had invited her poor driver to mock him had instead been shown a different way to live. And while Victoria Harrington would never be a completely different person, she was still ambitious, still demanding, still occasionally impatient. She had learned that true wealth couldn't be measured in dollars or social standing. It was measured in connections. In purpose. In seeing people for who they truly were, not just what they could do for you. As she stepped out into the Boston evening beside James Sullivan, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in years, not the hollow satisfaction of social triumph or business success, but genuine contentment. The journey wasn't over, she was still learning, still growing. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Victoria Harrington was moving in the right direction. And it had all begun with a cruel invitation and the man who had accepted it anyway. If you enjoyed this story of transformation and second chances, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing these meaningful stories to life. Remember that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones with the most to teach us, and true wealth isn't measured by what we have, but by how we connect with others. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.